What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. The HYDROSOUL was a champion that was being developed in the very early stages of League of Legends that actually had a pretty fleshed out backstory and a lot of potential. Unfortunately though, he's been cancelled, but after doing some research, it's honestly so cool to see what the HYDROSOUL could have been. As well, just before we start, here are some of my favorite comments where I ask what character from any universe you guys wish would be added into League of Legends. Today I want to know what's your favorite thing about the HYDROSOUL. And if you enjoy the video, hit that like button, and if you don't, please hit the dislike, because if this video hits 10,000 ratings, I'm gonna buy myself another pizza. Anyways, let's get started. The HYDROSOUL was in development around late 2009 and early 2010, and was officially announced as cancelled on October 7th, 2010, by lead champion designer HYDROSOUL. He was set up to be some kind of this water wizard that used water magic in a very offensive way, similar to how Annie uses fire magic almost. However, Riot has actually never announced any official word on the HYDROSOUL other than when Ezreal stated on the forums that he had been cancelled. However, that's more than enough information because confirmation of his cancellation confirms that he did exist in the first place for sure. As well, during the beta stages of League of Legends, the game actually had a ridiculous amount of extra information that was scattered throughout the game files and hidden in nooks and crannies, so by extracting data from the game files, information on a lot of characters surfaced, as well as information on characters no one had heard about or thought to conceive were true. And the HYDROSOUL happened to be one of those characters, discovered by analyzing the data in the game files, and upon this comment from HYDROSOUL, it's proof that they had planned on him being a champion or had at least spent some amount of time developing him. The full name of the HYDROSOUL was Soterios, the HYDROSOUL. Soterios is technically his main name, but I think calling him the HYDROSOUL sounds so much cooler, so I'm probably going to stick to doing that throughout the rest of the video. As for why the HYDROSOUL got cancelled, we can't really be too sure, but there were some rumors and also some meaningful evidence too that the reason why the HYDROSOUL got cancelled was because at the time, Riot was unable to animate the water effects properly and make it look as awesome as it should for a champion of this caliber, since they just simply didn't have the technology at the time. So they scrapped his idea. Remember, this was really early League of Legends. Back in 2009, League of Legends was a super tiny company with a small team that really didn't have too much technological power at all. I mean, they were drawing their ability icons in Microsoft Paint. I mean, they didn't even have Photoshop, man. Come on, you can't hold them to that high of a standard. But it's safe to say that now, they absolutely do have the technology to bring him to life, which makes me even more excited about the potential future for the HYDROSOUL, because despite being cancelled, he had actually progressed quite a bit in the development process, especially when it comes to his story. His full story and lore is pretty much completely fleshed out, and he even had some bits and pieces of abilities to go along with that backstory too. Let's take a look at his story as quoted from the League of Legends Wikipedia. Soterios gathered men and would toss them below the thrashing waves until water filled the poor soul's lungs, and he was rendered unconscious. Soterios would then proceed to rebirth the lost man, bringing them back to shore and pressing his holy hands upon the victim's chest, until he was brought back choking and coughing, reborn into the world as acolytes to the high priest. For years, Soterios conducted his rituals of rebirth unchallenged. Grown fanatical in his success with the rituals, Soterios was sure in his belief that his own rebirth would result in a divine transformation of his body, elevating him to an even higher level of power. At a command from Soterios, his acolytes lowered the high priest into the cold, dark sea. Unfortunately, his rebirth didn't go as planned, and as water filled his lungs, the dying high priest made one last plea to the higher powers. Reborn by the immortals, he renamed himself to the HYDROSOUL, and lives only now to do their bidding. Now, I don't know about you guys, but to me, that story seems cool as hell. He's kind of like this holy water mage gone wrong that became a product of his own devices and had like this full-blown stroke of karma as he became what he forced others to become in the past. And any sort of interaction with the gods in League of Legends is pretty awesome too, considering the HYDROSOUL exists in the form that he is in because the gods made him that way, and he's some kind of like twisted, enslaved disciple that the gods use for their own purposes. And man, What an awesome character. And to back up his story, we actually have a decent amount of information on what his abilities could have been. It's not perfect, so you'll have to bear with me and my estimates, but the information we have about him definitely shows some potential. The HYDROSOUL's passive was called Vortex. This is the ability that is probably the hardest to judge as to what it did, since it's his passive really, but I speculate that it's possible that it had some kind of interactions with the rest of his kit, although it's true that back then most passives were actually just that, passives, meaning that they only really gave you stats rather than some crazy complex ability that affected your entire kit. So maybe it worked along with his AP to give him a boost to his other abilities on casting them, or maybe give him attack damage based on his ability power or something like that. His Q was called Torrent. There's a joke about him being a pirate somewhere in there, but I'll spare you guys on that one. My best guess for this ability is that it was something similar to Misfortune's E, but was an area of effect rainstorm instead, but still dealt damage and slowed opponents who walked through it. His W was an ability called Typhoon. This one's pretty interesting. At first I thought it might have been like a mini Nami ultimate that was maybe a lot smaller, but a lot faster, and that it was like a skill shot that shot out a wave that knocked up anyone hit by it. But I think a better way to describe it actually is maybe like a toned down Aurelian Soul ultimate, and that it's almost kind of instant, right? Where Nami's ultimate has like this really slow missile speed. This could be a really powerful ability and the main strength of his kit, or his main piece of utility. Based on the icon, it definitely had something to do with waves, and that kind of concept likely would have been pretty nice and give him some decent power and a strong ability. His E was an ability called Soothing Aura, and this one we have a lot of information on. We know 100% for sure that this was a passive ability that read passive. Well animates soothing waves of energy that refresh nearby friendly units, with the effect to passively give mana to all nearby allies, with the mana gained by nearby allied units per second, scaling at a rate of 0.5, 0.6, 0.7, 0.8, and 0.9. Now on paper, that doesn't seem that good at all actually, especially since back then, mana costs were so much higher than they are today. So it's possible that his E maybe had an active or a toggled component to go along with the passive aura, otherwise it might not have been the best ability. Or maybe his other basic abilities made up for where his Soothing Aura ability lacked. And lastly, his ultimate was called Water Elemental. This one's a little bit obvious. I mean, if you think back to his lore about how he had all those acolytes working for him and such, and his ultimate certainly would just summon a water elemental. I'm pretty sure about this one because similar to how we have this really basic underdeveloped in-game model for the HYDROSOUL, we also have a very basic underdeveloped model for his water elemental. It looked like this and took the form of a seahorse. It's possible it functioned a bit like Annie's Tibbers, but I'd wager the ability would be a whole lot more about what you actually did with the elemental during its duration, rather than just front-loading everything on the initial cast like Tibbers does. All in all, I don't think his kit sounds like the most amazing thing ever, but it does have some potential, and it does fit in with his lore quite nicely for the most part. Although some of the info I have is just raw speculation, it's not unlikely that Riot had a completely fleshed out kit for him, considering that we do have a really good idea of what at least 2 of his 5 abilities were from just extracting bits and pieces from the game files in the past. I've always thought the HYDROSOUL was one of the more interesting and unique champions that has been cancelled in the early stages of League of Legends, since unlike most cancelled champions, the HYDROSOUL hasn't really had any major parts of his kit or character concepts reincarnated into another champion. While some of the more well-known cancelled champions like Seth and Omen have been pretty much brought to life completely in the forms of Azir and Rek'Sai, well, Soterius, even to this day, still has potential to be fleshed out quite a bit more and released without any redesigns or major changes. Which is awesome to consider that it's not impossible that he will become a champion, and even if he won't, his character still could be brought to life in a new form, I guess. Although he shares a vaguely similar theme to Nami in terms of the water magic thing going on, there's no doubt that he's a completely different character, and I highly doubt Nami took much inspiration from the HYDROSOUL at all. As well, the HYDROSOUL's backstory is something that I think is just super interesting and cool, and could make for a really awesome character. as well, the fact that he might have just been cancelled simply because at the time Riot didn't have the technology to do the HYDROSOUL justice, not because the story didn't fit, and not because they couldn't piece together a gameplay kit, and you really can't help but hope for the potential of the HYDROSOUL being added into the game in the future. No matter what happened in the past, there's no doubt at all that Riot definitely does have the technology to make the HYDROSOUL nowadays, and I for one am hoping that day will eventually come. So either way, here's to the future and my hope that Soterius the HYDROSOUL can be made into something awesome eventually. And that's just about it. If you enjoyed the video, subscribe if you want. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.